Welcome to Build and Scale with Devika, the podcast that takes you inside the journeys of founders who have turned bold ideas into successful businesses. I'm your host, Ken. Today, I sit down with Rich Bell, a CEO and entrepreneur who has scaled businesses across childcare, tech, education, fitness, and now one of Australia's fastest growing wellness brands. And that is only in the last 10 years. We'll unpack the leadership moments, the tech bets, and the lessons learned behind 4 different industries. So before I start, I want to say thank you, Rich. Thanks for coming on.
No worries at all.
It's a pleasure. I've been part of a small part of your journey, so it'd be great to get, the whole journey, the background, and how you got to where you are today. Yeah, let's start there. So what got you into entrepreneurship, and what got you started in that journey?
It's interesting. I don't know how far to go back, but I guess I'll start with, as a young kid, I was from like a family business background, which I think you can probably relate to.
Definitely.
Where you wake up in the mornings and, your dad's always at work, and most of the time you're at work with him. So Saturday morning, it'd be 6 a.m. and I'd hear a knock on the door, and the bedroom door, and I'd have to go to work with him and sweep the warehouse and sweep the store and work on quotes with him. And that business is in logistics and transport, and it's a 4th generation business, meaning I'm the 4th generation who was probably meant to take it over, but I definitely won't be, much to my father's disappointment. But the reason I share that story is I think when you've been around that mindset and that mindset of having a business and understanding commercial acumen from a young age, and I think that's just imprinted on your brain. I don't think it's something that can be easily rubbed off on if you're not around that. For me, I was part of that from a young age. I was reading annual reports for fun out of publicly listed companies when I was 15 and 16. So I think it's something that's always been in my DNA because of the environment that I was in. I'd often come home from school and Dad would say, listen, don't worry about this homework for a minute. I'll show you how I'm getting a shipping container from, Hobart to Japan. And this is how I'm going to calculate it. So I was always exposed to that from a very young age. And I'm very thankful for that. I think the other thing that I'll say there is when you've been from a family business background, you understand work ethic because it is literally 24/7. It's not like someone having a job or doing a 9 to 5. It completely consumes you as a kid and also your family at that time. So
I guess that gave you the fundamentals and the belief to go and become an entrepreneur. But what was the moment that was big for you where you said, I'm not going to continue on the 4th generation and go start your own journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, it happened over time, and it's really easy to, I guess, reflect on that and try and find a defining moment. But one thing with my story, which is something that I absolutely think is true now, is it's evolved over time, and you couldn't plan it out. 16-year-old Rich trying to plan the next 20 years would not have rolled how I thought it would roll. But I think ultimately I knew one thing, and that was that I wanted to make something of my life and I wanted to make something of myself. And entrepreneurship or I don't really like that word, but being in business was the path to be able to do that. For me, there was a couple of passions that I had because it's really important for me that I always combine something I love with business. It's never just about business. It should be always, for me, it was always about how can I do something I love? How can I drive with passion, but at the same time have that commercial acumen? So I started consulting in the health and wellness space. And that was kind of combining my love for health and fitness and business at the same time.
Awesome. So I guess when we met, you were in your childcare scale-up journey. So growing that business from 5 to 50 sites and leading a team of 1,500 staff. What was that journey like and some of the hurdles along the way?
Yeah, it was hard. That's the truth. I think that, when I, got into that business, the goal was to try and, drive it and scale it, and really fortunate enough that I was able to do that with, the right people around me. And some of the lessons along that journey are, the way that you need to lead an organization at, 100 staff and 5 centers versus the way that you need to lead at 1,500 staff and 50 centers is 2 very different people. I think sometimes in the business journey, we often forget that at different stages, you need to focus on different things and play a different role. So, in the early days, it was like, getting your hands dirty, showing that you can be a part of the team. I can remember there's photos of me going around. I was on a jackhammer and a paintbrush, building a center, to kind of show the team, in those early days that the leader can do it, the leader's a part of it, and no job is above me. And I think that's really important from a foundation and a fundamental perspective of an early stage business. It is about that culture and that buy-in and that belief. But as you start to scale up and you build infrastructure and systems and an operational rigor, then it's about how you lead and how you motivate other people towards your vision. And then as you start to get even higher in that scale journey, where you do have over 1,000 staff, it becomes about then what infrastructure and what systems and what technology have I got in place to be able to drive the same result. And then as the leader, it's really understanding what do you need to touch at the right time to get the most impact out of that business. And I think a lot of leaders fundamentally fail to understand that. They operate the same as they were from day one. They're still in there wanting to control everything, wanting to get their hands dirty, wanting to touch everything. The challenge with that is you're not really building a business if you're doing that. You're kind of building a really high-paying job that you're required to be at and you're stressed, rather than building a scalable asset that doesn't require you to run, and that asset is valuable with or without you, and you add your flavor and your value to that asset over time in the right areas.
And what was it like maintaining the culture when you're growing so fast? I knew there was a lot of different events that you held, and what was that like, and what were some examples of trying to keep the culture and in that journey?
Yeah, well, for me, culture in business is number one, and it's not just about culture, but it's about leadership, right? I think number one, as a leader, you need to stand for something. I'm massive in that. You need to be able to stand for something behind your business and have a vision that is worth fighting for. So, I have 3 young children myself, so being in childcare wasn't just, a commercial play to make money. There was a fundamental philosophy there that I believed in, and people need to know that you believe in that, and you stand in front of that, and you lead strongly with that. Having a set of company values or a company philosophy that you deeply believe in and that your team deeply believe in is absolutely important, because vision, mission, and values, or your philosophy, is the only thing that you have to stand on if you're not talking to everyone every day. And then you mentioned it as well, but really important to make sure you've got an opportunity to address your team and your people at all times, where it just comes from your mouth. Because as a company builds and scales, you might have assistants around you, you might have executives. I had 8 executives reporting to me. They have their teams and they have their view of how things should run. However, I'm a massive believer in, you need to ensure that you get maybe 4 or 5 times a year, you get the opportunity to speak directly to your team. So that might be an entire company Zoom, which I used to do all the time. And I've done that in many companies, right? Where you've got 1,500 staff on a Zoom call just speaking to you. And you give them the opportunity to ask questions. You give them the opportunity to have a real conversation with you about where the business is at. We would run annual gala events or annual dinners. Again, I've done that in all the companies that I've been involved with, right? And I guess that's the Rich Bell formula in a way with those leadership pillars, is ensuring that you can always have an opportunity to speak with your team. And when they leave that meeting, they shouldn't be just going, oh, that was great, that was a nice meeting. Like, they should be going, wow, I am so lucky I work for this guy. I'm so lucky I work for this company. I believe what he believes, and I feel like we're going somewhere. Like, at a big business level, never underestimate the power of someone wanting to be in your company and wanting to work for you, because that is what will determine what happens when you're not there. Right? People work for people. Doesn't matter what your company is, what your brand is, people work for people. I'm going to share a side note if I can.
Definitely.
I'm a massive NRL fan and a big Manly Sea Eagles supporter. I'm going to do a video on this later today, but I want to share it here. The Manly Sea Eagles started the year and they were 4 losses coming into the season. We're getting belted by every team. The culture at the club was at an all-time low. They had a coach and a leader that the players didn't respect, the fans didn't like, and there was unrest inside of the club. they decided to make a shift. They sacked Anthony Seibold, which is really public knowledge, and they brought in Kieran Foran. Kieran Foran is a 35-year-old dude who just finished playing last year. And he'd won a premiership with Manly, and he had almost zero coaching experience. He was the assistant at Manly for 4 months prior. That was it. Fast forward, Manly have won 4 games in a row, and not just one, but belted teams. Okay. He did not make any changes to the squad. He did not make any changes to the starting lineup. He did not recruit any more players. It is a massive lesson in leadership here. What he did was he stood in front of his people. He got them to believe in him. He got them to believe in each other. He got them to believe that they could win. And he played a style of football that they all wanted to play. If this isn't a lesson in leadership, I don't know what is. And I think sometimes in today's business world, we've forgotten the art of that. We have so much, sport's the same. We have so much technology, data, analytics pointing to what we should do. And especially in sport, right? It's a business. However, don't ever underestimate what a group of people can do if they are motivated, aligned, and being led the right way. Because nothing tactically or from a resource perspective changed, but they win 4 games in a row. How do you explain that? And the way you explain that is leadership.
Yeah. It's an amazing story on both sides. And I think sometimes some leaders, what they might do is be afraid to come out with their decisions or with their view of the world. Yeah. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, especially in today's world, right?
Definitely.
Look, as a middle-aged Caucasian white male, you can sometimes get in trouble when you say the wrong thing. So I definitely relate to that. But look, I think that you need to stand for something or you fall for anything. That's something that I've absolutely lived my life by. You're never going to please everyone. So the idea of leadership is not about making every single person happy. The idea of leadership is committing to the cause and committing to the vision. So you may not make your shareholders happy. You may not make your business partners happy. You may not make all your staff happy. However, if you are genuinely doing the best thing for that organization to propel it forward, then that is your not only obligation, but it's your responsibility as a leader. So I think more leaders need to stand up in today's world. And I think people right now are yearning for quality leadership more than they ever have, and not just in business.
So does that start with like a North Star? Like how do you go about that, and does it evolve? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, man without a vision will perish. I think vision is everything, right? Like people need hope. People need to be led. People need to come to work every day and go, I'm a part of something that is bigger than myself. I'm a part of something that I really believe in. So yeah, absolutely. Starting with a vision, and whether that vision is holistic, like, making an impact or, doing something great or something kind of, I guess, philosophy based, or it can be very deliberate in terms of a metric. So, it can be around impacting your consumer, can be around the amount of sites that you want. So, with Joy in Movement, which is my wellness company, our first North Star is having 1,000 sites, open. Now, it's not just about the commercial gain or the commercial success of that. It's actually about, well, what would that mean if we had 1,000 locations open? Number one, we'd be impacting a lot of people from a health and wellness perspective, getting people to move who are not currently moving. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We'd be making a profound impact on the franchisees, because they would have a profitable business, and we would create what's called the network effect. So in franchising, when you have franchising at scale, so 200, 300, 400, the network effect comes into play. Anytime Fitness are probably a good example of that, or McDonald's or Starbucks, where they're everywhere. So therefore the brand is elevated, the more people know about it, and then the better those individual units do. But those things are important, yes, because people want to come to work every day and go, what are we building. For me, I can't deal with business as usual. Like, it's the worst 3 words ever invented. Like, we are either doing something great or what's the point?
Yeah, fantastic. So before we get to Jim, what in that journey with the childcare centers, there was obviously a missing link to recruitment and how you went about that. So tell me a little bit about that story, because when we look at building software, there's digital transformations and then there's digital products. So actually building a platform in place to help you scale your business. But then on the other side, seeing an opportunity that is a gap in your business, but not just your business, the whole industry, and then taking the view that you want to build a digital product, a marketplace, and bring that to the market. What was that journey like? How did that spark, and what was that journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I'm definitely not going to take credit for the idea. And you'll notice a real trend throughout.
Why not?
A real trend throughout my career is I'm not the ideas guy, and I own that. I'm not the kind of guy to sort of sit in the dark room by myself and think up of this magical idea. But I definitely know a great business and a great idea when I see one. And Z Staffing was absolutely that. And my partner in the childcare business had this idea for a number of years to be able to create like an on-demand service for staff in the childcare sector, because it's a challenging sector. Often you are short-staffed or people call in sick, the day of with late notice. And because you're regulated under ratio, you need to have those staff there. It's not an option. So we went about building Z Staffing right from the ground up. We started it, inside of the offices, and went into it and dumped a whole bunch of money and started to build the team. And we did it manually because we needed 2 sides of the marketplace to start with. We needed the educators, but then we needed the centers to come on board, so that we could actually match those 2. And like all double-sided marketplaces, you've got to control the supply side and the demand side in the same region at the same time. Otherwise, the technology won't work. So our approach was, don't build it with technology to start with. Make the idea work, as in get the right educators, get the right centers, and then the match is clear. And then we created a whole bunch of business rules and business processes that we wanted inside of the technology before we came to this awesome company called Devika.
So how far did you feel like, firstly, I always say it's best to do something manually to actually solve a problem. So that way, that there is a problem that you're solving, and then bring in tech to help you scale that problem. So it's definitely a really good example of, solving the problem first before scaling it. Otherwise, we're scaling a bad solution quickly. So that was really good to see. But I guess, what made you feel comfortable to then double down on it? How quickly was that? And, lack of being true product market fit, but where you went, okay, now we have a business, and and the other part of that is people have their current business, which is business as usual, like you said, and it's like, how do you get away from going, okay, that's not going to consume me while we're going to build this other business in parallel? Well,
I mean, I'll start there. It's really important that we acknowledged it was going to be 2 separate businesses. No way was it one in the same. So we went pretty heavy to start with, with capital, and hired a general manager and another kind of co-founder to come in and drive it, and set it up for us. That was really important to have a kind of head of that as well. And then secondly, we had to look at, were we actually solving a real problem? Now, in many industries, if you want a short-term agency staff member, you're literally calling up all of the agencies and going, oh, I need this staff, I need 5 staff here, can you do it? And you'll call 6 agencies at once, and they will maybe send you a staff member and then invoice you a week later for some random amount, which you have no idea about. So the fundamental problem was the short-term labor hire on-demand market was broken. So that was the number one problem that we had to solve, and we were confident we could solve it. Then when we started matching these shifts just manually, with spreadsheets and that kind of stuff, it got to a point where we were like, wow, this is what other recruitment firms and labor hire firms must do all the time at scale. No wonder they've got 50, 60, 70 people in their back office starting at 3 a.m, trying to match a worker with a shift. manually.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went for it. We thought, hey, let's do this. We can build this technology business independent of the childcare business. And then we started to drive that, and obviously met with Devika. And I mean, the thing that we really enjoyed about meeting with you guys early on was you weren't just a technology company, and that was important for us. You were entrepreneurs who understood kind of product to market fit. You understood scale, and then you also understood that the relationship was not forever. It was, how can we get MVP out? How can we get the technology functioning? But more importantly, how can you build the code base so that it can be easily taken over from an internal team, which is what we have now.
Yeah, definitely. And when we look at those two separate businesses, they're very different. So equally as impressive was Zed Staffing and how it grew and how it progressed and evolved. What were some of the different hurdles that a software as a service company or a marketplace brings compared to 50 centers?
Yeah, well, number one, they are very different. However, I'll come back to my principle in business, and that is that I've played in education, I've played in fitness, I've played in wellness, I've played in tech, and I've played in childcare. And I've also played in adventure tourism on a global scale. So for me, I've always maintained a belief that 80% of a business is the same. You have sales, marketing, leadership, finance, governance, systems, operational rhythms, accountability, capital structures. Those things in a business never change. Fundamentally, I'm a business person, and all of those rules are applied and applicable regardless of sector. And I think that's something that is really important to acknowledge. As a non-technical founder, there were some nuances that we had to learn, and that's the final 20% to answer your question. That final 20% are the nuances you need to learn about a tech business or about a different industry. And that can be, regulation or trade secrets or benchmarks and metrics specific to that industry or those businesses. So we surrounded ourselves with some pretty successful people in the SaaS space who had scaled the business before. One guy who had started from scratch and scaled a business up to, I think, 1.2 billion was their last vow. He was a personal friend of mine. So and just for confidentiality, I won't mention him, but having mentors and people like that around us who had done that before was really, really helpful. And then I guess the challenges through that period that you face, number one is realizing that tech can be really expensive, and it's never done. You build something, and then that means that something's going to break, or something might not work in in another area of the business, or you realize that you've got to shard your databases because there's too much data going through. Like all of this stuff that I had no idea about pre-SaaS company, you learn in tech, knowing that it's expensive, knowing that it's never done. But then I think as well, as you hit critical mass, that supply and demand side of any marketplace or any business becomes a challenge. So for us, we had to invent some pretty cool technology, like a mapping software, which kind of mapped our supply and demand side overlaying each other, so we knew exactly what pockets were right to hire in and what pockets we needed to up the demand side to ensure that we had enough jobs for our workers. Probably another lesson in SaaS and tech is to get profitable as soon as you can. Because it's really easy just to burn and burn and burn. And I'm a massive fan of driving growth and not optimizing profitability, but you have to have a plan for profitability. At some point, it's got to make sense, and the unit economics have to stack up of the business model. It can't just be about revenue, especially in today's market.
Yeah, super interesting. I get asked a lot around surrounding yourself with the right people. So what was, you mentioned you had an advisor or different people. What were you looking for when you were looking for an advisor?
I think it's really important that a mentor-mentee relationship is formed naturally. Very rarely have I seen it work when somebody just reaches out and tries to put a commercial deal in front of your face to be their mentor. I can just speak personally. I reckon I get approached weekly to either invest, sit on a board, mentor somebody. And I love that, by the way. But for me, where it always works is if there's a genuine relationship there. So, we have coffee or we have a dinner or we go to the same event and we actually really like each other and there's a nice relationship there, rather than, hey, can I meet you? I've got this proposal for you. This is a great deal. Like, to pay me, I don't know, 10 grand a month or 20 grand a month to be your advisor is not really that interesting anymore, right? It's actually about having a great relationship there and ensuring that that relationship can then turn into something natural and fruitful and commercial. So your question was, what do you look for in a mentor? First of all, it's about having a genuine relationship. Second of all, it's something that's got to evolve naturally. And thirdly, I think it's important that the person I always look for is who has done what I want to do and who's done it before. That for me is almost number one. When I was running Leaders Club, which was the boardroom sessions I used to do, I did that for 5 years in a row, where people would meet with me every month and I'd run a boardroom session, and that would help me with deal flow and different businesses to invest in. What the feedback was always, Rich, the reason we like to come to these is because you've actually had a business, you've scaled, you've exited, you've been the CEO, you've been the investor, you get it. And I think there's so many mentors and advisors and coaches out there. When you ask them what business they've scaled or, how they made their money, if their answer is from coaching, for me, that is a red flag. Always look for someone who has done what you want to be able to do.
Fantastic. That's it's really good advice. And I think it really resonates even for someone like myself, because when you're looking for, let's say, answers or better questions to ask, I think it's always a great place to start is asking someone that's already done it before. And that can be really hard to find those people, but I think it's definitely a recipe for success. So it sounds like if someone wants help, they should get a Manly box and they should hit you up.
Absolutely. Very.
And say, hey, Rich,
yes.
I got a box. Yes. No questions until you get there.
You're done. Very happy for that. Very happy.
Good. So, that was a journey around childcare and recruitment around childcare, and that's an ongoing endeavor. But your latest backing is Joy in Movement, which is gym. So tell us a little bit about that. You've already mentioned a little bit, but tell us more about it, and then we'll go into more of the detail around that too.
Yeah, sure. First of all, gym's an awesome business, something that I'm really proud of, and something that I genuinely think will change the wellness industry, just in how we look at it, how we think about it, but more importantly, who the consumer is, wanting to move a little bit more. And I think gym has nailed a sweet spot there. So it's Australia's first fully automated infrared workout. So it's in a room of, say, 50 to 60 square meters. It's heated to around 40 degrees, low impact movement. So it's really targeted for those people who don't exercise. So there's no mirrors inside of a Joy in Movement. There's no instructor, and that's led through AI and automation so that the member can go in and feel comfortable. But then from a franchising perspective, what we've tried to do is we've tried to lower the cost to actually enter in and own a franchise. Some of the gyms out there in today's world are sort of 7, 8, 900,000 to get started and open a franchise. We like to see our investment sit under that 250, 275. And then our payback on capital time is much faster than many other franchises as well. So it's a cool brand. We've got 50 locations in Australia right now. We've got a master franchise agreement in the UK, so they'll open up 100 in the next 5 years, and then we'll start to tinker with the US as well.
Yeah, I saw you were just in America. What was that trip like?
It was good. Courtside at the Lakers was fun. The trip was fantastic. Had a lot of meetings over there just around company structures, just with, I guess, boring stuff. I find it fun, but lawyers and accountants and understanding how we're going to set up the structure globally, but then also looking at what's happening on the ground. So my style in business is I become completely obsessed with that market or that area. So I went and trialed 16, 17 different offerings while I was over there, everything that involved AI, infrared, yoga, Pilates, because I want to know what is the consumer experiencing on the ground and how do we differ from that. I wanted to touch and feel the other brands as well and understand, like I said, on the ground from a consumer perspective, what takes place. I think it's very easy to get Ogilvy or PwC to write a research paper on the wellness market in the US. But I very much like to be over there hands-on before we start to enter that market.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's a business that is a real hybrid between tech and bricks and mortar. So how are you juggling that? What does that look like? And what are some of the decisions that you've made? I know you've already mentioned a few of them to drive your mission and your vision.
Yeah, well, I think number one, Gym, first and foremost, is a brand. So it's a play on words there. So joy in movement, JIM, and if you look at some of the branding, it's like, Jim hates burpees too, go hard and, let's go home and eat pizza. So it's really like, hey, being healthy and being well isn't always about eating tuna, lettuce, and protein shakes. It's actually about holistically moving your body more and being happy about it, which is where the joy comes from. So brand is number one. And my partner in that business, Jared, is incredible at driving brand and vision, and that's his area that he absolutely thrives in. But then as well, it's about going, how can we ensure that when someone as a franchisee comes in, how can we ensure that they have the best possible chance of success? So that's an area that I'm very passionate about, is, getting involved and coaching those businesses and putting the education and the advisory and the systems around it so they become amazing business owners. So we're working on a whole bunch of stuff around scaling them being great business owners. But as well, if we get the model right in terms of, low rent, low square meterage, the risk of their break-even cost is far smaller than it would be in a normal gym. And then the AI component and the automation component, like, not needing staff members to actually run the product or the classes, brings down the cost significantly to the operating model of that business. Therefore, you can have lower rent and lower memberships, and it's a win-win for the consumer, for the franchisee, and for us. So it's about protecting those core fundamentals. We have a risk, of course, of being copied. So more commercially, I'm really passionate about making sure we go fast so that we can get that network effect really early on. We've only been really going hard for 2 years, but I'd like to go harder, as always. So.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic. I guess, moving forward, there's just a few questions for people that are either in the startup, scale up, or even just a traditional business. How often do you start with, let's say, an exit strategy for you specifically, or is it more around identifying a problem, solving it, scaling it, and then molding an exit at a later stage, or is it right at the start?
Great question. I think any business should be built with the view of being valuable and scalable if you're going on that kind of business growth journey. So I don't think anyone ever builds a business that is not saleable or valuable. And if you're going into something thinking, I don't want to sell it, I'm just going to kind of tinker around and see what happens, I think that's a risky place to be. You should always be thinking value, scale, impact. And then secondly, I think you need to understand in any market, there's going to be trends, and that's called macroeconomics. That's where there's different technologies, different things happening outside of your inner microeconomics world. It's actually looking at where's the world moving, what's hot right now, what are the consumers buying. And if you look at joy in movement as an example, infrared, wellness, AI, a massive trend. And I reckon that will be the trend for the next kind of 7 to 10 years. But who knows what happens after that, right? So you've got to be thinking, not I'm going to sell, but you've got to be thinking, how long does our current model suit the consumer? How does it suit the marketplace? Now, that doesn't mean that you sell the business to someone after 7 years. What that means is you've got to keep innovating, keep moving forward to keep up with the market if you don't want to, sell that business. But for sure, from my perspective, I'm always thinking, once I've built this, is it an IPO? Is it a trade sale, or is it a private equity buy? Or is it a private buyout from the board or other shareholders? For me, my most valuable asset is time.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess when it comes to other learnings, what do you think has shifted your views from 16-year-old Rich that started to today's Rich? Like, what do you think you prioritized more back then, and what do you think your mindset has changed and shifted based off the experience that you have and yeah.
I think I still have the same level, if not more, drive than I had when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now there's a lot of knocks and a lot of wisdom and a lot of battle scars on board to be able to navigate things in a much calmer and a much measured way. Not everything has to be done with brute force, drive, and determination.
Mm-hmm.
I think now you can do things with relationships, strategy, your networks, and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think from a young age, there was always a lot of fear from my perspective in terms of like, you know, have to be successful. And I don't think that's healthy as you evolve in life and you have kids and you do all that stuff. It's got to be from a place of, hey, I love this and I'm excited to do this. So that's probably the biggest difference is those drivers. I think as well, 16-year-old Rich, there's rose-colored glasses on,
Mm-hmm.
thinking everything's going to work. The eternal optimist, you know, you're never going to be screwed over. Everything's going to be great. You know, no business is going to go bad. Everything's always going to be great. And that's just not the truth. There needs to be a more balanced view that things can go well, but they can also go very bad if not managed in the right way. So having a more balanced view.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really appreciate your time today. It was a pleasure working together over those couple of years with Zed Staffing and staying in touch and always learning new things from you, and also especially around the leadership aspects of running a business. It's always been something that I've looked up to you towards. So yeah, really appreciative of that, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what's next with Jim and the growth of that, and staying in touch, and hopefully yeah, learning more around the journey.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.